Hey, parents, welcome back to our show. I got to thank you because this is crazy. Last week, we had another record of downloads. So, you sharing our episodes with your spouse, with your friends, your family members, it is truly benefiting us so much. So, thank you for continuing to share our message with people in your circles, and please continue to do that. Also, I wanted to remind you that we are on YouTube. So, all of our episodes are recorded on video. And so, if you prefer to kind of see who's talking to you, who the guest is on our show, check us out on our YouTube channel. Just put in Families of Character and we'll pop right up. So, let's jump into today's topic. If you ever think, man, my spouse and I are so different. There's all these little things we do that are totally different. You are not alone, okay? This is normal in marriage, but sometimes it can cause some kind of lumps and bumps in our relationship and these underlying annoyances that just sort of eat at us. And so today I have on our show an expert, not an expert necessarily in differences or lumps and bumps, so to speak, but an expert in marriage and family issues. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Mario Sacasa.
Thanks, Jordan, so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
This is just going to be great. I'm so glad you're joining us. Guys, Dr. Sacasa is the host of his own podcast called Always Hope. And on his podcast, he focuses on providing solutions to life's challenges that are grounded in faith and psychology. And Dr. Mario travels the country offering lectures on dating, marriage, sexuality, and the misunderstood virtue of hope. He's also the creator of 2 online courses, Dating Well, which helps young adults navigate the modern dating scene. Oh, thank you. And Overcoming Stress and Anxiety, which offers clear guidance for beating stress in life. And he's also married to his wife, Kristen, of 21 years, and they share the joy of raising 4 sons.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. You are busy out there parenting, psychologying, and all the things.
Traveling and podcasting and all the things and editing, which I failed to do because I've been married for 22 years now. So I got to update that little bio. So before my wife gets me in trouble, or before I get in trouble with my wife, sorry, she's not going to get me in trouble.
Do you ever worry about her listening to these episodes? Because I'm like, man, no.
No, she does. She listens to it. Yeah. We always have
Well, shout out to
afterwards.
Kristen.
Yeah. Thanks. She needs a shout out. Shout out, Kristen. We love you, sweetie.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. So tell us a little bit, Mario, about just like your passion, your own story around like this topic of, accepting differences in your marriage. Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where it comes from. I before kind of going out on my own and doing this podcast on my own and the speaking gigs and all that stuff, I was working for a marriage ministry based out of New Orleans for about 6 years. And in that marriage ministry, we would run marriage retreats there locally. There was a beautiful abbey on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain, St. Joseph's Abbey. And we had a nice retreat center that was tailored to married couples, which if you've ever attended a marriage retreat or done a marriage retreat, you know that actually finding rooms that are tailored to married couples is almost non-existent. And so the fact that like you didn't have to have 2 twins beds and someone being uncomfortable, being like, we're going to make this awkward, or someone sleeping on the one twin, or we're going to try to put them together and someone sleeping in the crack. Like, how are we doing this? It was actually a queen bed. So anyways, great facility that we had, and we would do these retreats. Well, at one point during the weekend, we go from the retreat center and walk over to the Abbey to join the monks for evening prayer. And one day, as we're taking this walk over from the retreat center to the Abbey Church, one of the attendees, one of the wives, she goes, Dr. Mario, of all the things that you've learned in your years of being a marriage therapist and doing speaking engagements this whole bit, like, what's the one bit of advice that's like the best bit of advice that you can give me? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was kind of on my heels and just surprised by the question and trying to think real quick. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was that your spouse is a different person, And 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 it's like we that may sound so obvious, but the truth is that when we get into arguments, when we get into disagreements, often we forget that yes, in fact, our spouse is a different person. And so often the arguments that we get into surround this notion of why can't you just see the things the way that I see them? Why can't you just do the things the way I want them to be done? Why can't you just read my mind and understand the world exactly the way that I understand it? Because if you could just do that, then this whole thing would be a lot easier. Which is also a false statement, by the way, because we argue with ourselves probably more often than we argue with anybody else. But we could save that for another conversation. But we get into this kind of tug of war, push and pull, and uh, and part of marriage is learning how to overcome that and overcome our own ego, but also recognizing that conflict here doesn't always have to result in competition. It doesn't have to result in somebody winning or losing. It can simply just be that there is a difference that's here. And what I'm trying to guide couples towards, and we can talk more about this throughout the episode, is to try to help them to recognize that if they can have their eyes open to these differences and recognize that the differences are in fact there, then we can see that as an asset. We can see that as a value. Because the truth is, we'd probably be buried. I mean, excuse me, we'd probably be bored if we married somebody like ourselves. um, we need the difference. It's not so much that opposites attract, but opposites do complement each other. And if we can see that the way that my wife makes decisions, the way that she thinks, the way that she encounters the world has value, and the way that I encounter the world has value, and that together, maybe this gives more data to whatever decision, whatever problem we're trying to solve, then that's a much healthier way to move forward in marriage.
I like how you said that just considering that it provides more data to make decisions. It's like
Hmm.
it's not just a one-sided perspective that we have, but as a married couple, there's another perspective that could be a real benefit to navigating whatever it is that you're deciding on, or whatever is coming next in the season of family life for you that you really need to kind of make some decisions around and plan about. So
Yeah.
I like that. That sounds like hey, I got more resources here. This is good. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but it's like there's two people pitching in ideas, and we can take a little bit from both.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Kristen and you can put math problems in front of us, and the way that she gets to the solution is different than the way that I get to the solution. I'm like, well, what was your order of operations there, and why did you go in that direction? Because that's just wrong, right? But that's the way we get into it, and in recognizing then also that, right, like we can walk into a room and the things that I perceive are going to be different than the things that she perceives. The things that are going to activate her sympathetic response and call some threat response is going to be different than the things that are going to make me feel threatened or stressed. All of that is meant to be information that can help us to be able to see the world. And as you said, be able to make decisions that are going to be of mutual benefit to each other. But it does, again, it requires years of conversation, growth in trust, growth in vulnerability, understanding each other, getting through all those normal arguments that happen when you first get married, working through those, managing expectations. But if we can do that, then we can start seeing what this marriage thing actually is about.
Mm. So good to present to a couple together as well. If they can both get on the same page that, we do have differences and acknowledge here are some of the ways we're so different from each other.
Hmm.
And then use that as like their superpower to
Hmm.
go, which method should we use this time, right? We got two ways to go. Uh, i- i- you know, Sometimes I worry that if one person gets this information and the spouse is not hearing the same thing, that it just kind of falls apart for the couple. One person is saying, okay, I get it, like we're different, and I accept this about us, and I want us to work together to navigate things using both of our skills. And I realize that your perception is different, and that it's important for me to kind of join your perspective and get on your page. when I can. But if the other person is like, out to lunch is not tuning into this message or whatever,
Well, they should
it
be.
could
They should be
be
listening to these
tough.
podcasts. That's the answer. Just make sure that they listen to the podcast.
I love that you're coaching couples,
Uh-huh.
and that you're working on this, that you believe in this sacrament of marriage,
Uh-huh.
and that this is the long game, right? And the
It's the
little
long game.
things like our
Yeah.
differences,
Yeah.
they really can make or break a marriage.
Yeah, they can. So when Chris and I first got married, we did all the things that newlywed couples do is you want to spend every minute together that you possibly can. And so those first couple weeks, even like sleeping, she would lay on me and I'd be like, okay, and again, here's one of the areas where we're different. Like Kristen, she can go to sleep and she wakes up in the same position, and it's like she can get up, put the sheets up, and everything's fine. Me, I don't know who I'm wrestling in the middle of the night, but I have dreams, I guess, like that dog, you see in cartoons that's like chasing the car or something, in the sheets like get all crazy. I remember being a kid and waking up on the other side of the bed. You ever had that happen before, where you wake up where your feet were and you're like,
Oh yeah.
what's going on, right? So like that's in essence who I am, I guess, as somebody who sleeps. So Kristen, when we first get married, she's laying on me, and this lasts about 2 weeks. And I'm trying to be nice and be like, okay, cute. Thank you, sweetie. I appreciate it. But I realize A, I'm hot because I have this person on me. And B, I can't move, which is what I normally do even when I'm asleep. And so it was one of our first areas of conversation where I said, sweetie, I appreciate the desire to want to spend every moment together, but this isn't working. And so I need you to just get over, on your side. And this is our compromise. Like I'll sleep on I'll big, you lean, I'll big spoon you. And then when I'm ready to move, I'll get off and then I'll go to sleep. And for me, there's like an algorithm. It's like left, right, belly, out, right. There's just, do that. So it's like, so that was like our first little compromise. And so you just recognize that, okay, that's just there. And there's not going to be any sort of, uh, like, it's not about somebody winning that. It's about just trying to figure out how to make this work. And I mean, again, out of that, all the normal disagreements. Why do you squeeze the toothpaste out of the middle? Why does the toilet paper roll go the wrong way? It's supposed to go over. Why are you folding my shirts that way? All those things start coming out. And that's not part of any marriage preparation inventory. It's stuff that you just start learning and figuring out. And then what happens is you start changing your expectations and not placing these demands on her to be like you. And if you can really see the genius at work here in each of these perspectives, then it's not so much about winning. It's about how do we do this thing together? Oh, I see, your intuition is something that is of value here. Your ability, she tends to be the one who wants to go a little slower when making decisions. And I'm the one that's always like, all right, jump both feet forward and we'll figure it out as we go along. And in some cases, that's the right move. That no, we're going to force this thing. Like this is the right thing. We need it. We need to push past our fear. We're going to make this thing happen. And then the other times over the 22 years we've been married, where it's like, no, slow it down. Let's be a little more methodical. And that, of course, is the right decision. But it's trying to develop, like, if we can call it this, like a marital wisdom that allows, I guess, a knowledge to know when to do which one.
Hmm. And there's a surrender in that process,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah,
That
for sure.
happens. It has to. It's that dying to self where it's like, okay, maybe this isn't the time to push my perspective
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And so it's a giving up of something that, like you said, getting out of the way of your own ego, right? Or like
Hmm.
however
Yeah.
that goes.
Yeah. It's that, but it's also, see, marriage in a Christian sense is a sacrament, meaning that it is this mystery. And this is what St. Paul speaks about in his letters to the Ephesians, that marriage now becomes this sign of God's love to his people. And when we see this mystery, what's being communicated there, where it's saying that there's something unique about this relationship among other relationships. St. Paul doesn't say that friendship is that same witness, which is friendships are great. And in other types of relationships, he's not saying the boss employee relationship is this witness. He's saying marriages. And so there's something unique about marriage than any other human relationship. although other human relationships are good, but marriage sits above them. Well, why? Well, what's God doing in this? Well, there's a recognition that if I've committed myself to this person, God has given me this individual who is made in his image and likeness and is an eternal soul that is blessed with creativity, with intelligence, with imagination, that there's something eternal that's at work here beyond what I can just see by her body. And similar with me, that there's a soul, there's something that even within myself is a mystery. Marriage is then this commitment to want to peer into that soul, to want to understand who this person is and dedicate myself to taking care of her, but then also really growing to understand her. And so as you make that move, what's happening, I believe, is that this is just an icon of what we'll be doing in heaven, which is that peer into the very heart and mystery of God himself. And marriage just becomes this little capacity within my limitations of time and space to be able to somehow get a sense of what's coming next. I know it got real theological there for a second, but does that make sense?
Yes, I love that. The deeper meaning behind it, that
Hmm.
you really are trying, and it's a lifelong process to peer
Yes.
into the soul of your spouse and
Yes.
to continue to want to join them where they are and to understand things from their perspective and to really um, value their gifts and to use those.
And to discover them and to continue to want to be delighted by them. I mean, like the
Mm.
worst thing that could happen in any marriage is when we've just figured each other out and we're just flatlining at that point. And then we're cruising, we're just sailing. We're no longer discovering each other. And and this is what happens when married couples stop dating, they stop going out, they stop seeking new adventures together, they stop asking what they want to be when they grow up, they stop trying to understand each other. All of that, when that starts to die, that's a man, that's a tough place for couples.
It is. It puts you definitely at risk of just being in that sort of there's no hope, right? That
Hmm.
hopeless place in marriage where you feel like we've kind of come to the end of the road and
Hmm.
there's no saving this. And so I love how you mentioned several things that you could do if you got to that point to sort of get back on this track of discovering your spouse, right? You said
Yeah.
dating or even just asking them questions.
Yeah.
I hosted a parents' night out, date night event in
Yeah.
Denver
Awesome.
on February 14th on Valentine's Day. We do these monthly here, and you get like 12 couples together
Hmm.
um, and do a different exercise, couples exercise each time, where couples can really grow and learn about each other. Just sitting at their own table and spending
Hmm.
quality time in a larger group setting. And um, I just went back to something simple that like you do when you start dating. I pass out these little conversation cards,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's it.
One question on a card. And
Yeah.
people said at the end of the night, these are people that are married 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They said, we love the conversation cards because
Yes.
as parents and married couples, we are in the trenches every day. We're
Yes.
doing diapers, dishes, dinner, Ubering kids around. And
Yep.
like, we just don't take time to discover who our spouse is, who they're becoming, what their dreams and hopes are for the
Hmm.
future. And so this was so refreshing. And I was thinking, oh man, sometimes we overthink what it would take to get a couple reconnected, but it really can be just those simple things.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just being committed to those simple things. It's not enough to be co-parents. It's not enough to be good roommates. It's not enough to be parenting colleagues. Like we have to be spouses. And that's a different type of relationship than any of those other things that I said about. And I get it. Listen, I have 4 kids. I have one in college, two in high school, a fifth grader, and we're just moved from one sports season after another. And there's a couple weeks where 2 sports seasons overlap. And we're actually in the middle of that right now between soccer and basketball and track and field. We got a lot going on in our house. And it's easy to just get into, you have your checklist, I have my checklist. You do the pickups on this day, I do the pickups on this day. You handle these chores, I handle these chores. You take care of those bills, I take care of these bills. Great, awesome. All right, go. And then we just go and we're doing. And again, couples have to have those conversations. You got to fall into some type of rhythm of life. I get it. But every so often, you need to be able to take a break and say, we're going to put that all, while this is all good, we're going to put this aside and we're going to have an evening for us. We're going to go out for coffee. If the kids are little, put them down, watch Netflix, or put Netflix on for them, and then you go and have a cup of coffee in the back porch or a glass of wine together. Things that we just have to do. It's fine. You can use Netflix as a babysitter. She's cheap, okay? So it's all right.
Right.
And
She
so,
is cheap.
you know, and so it's things that we just have to do every so often, just to kind of touch base and remind yourself who you married. Who did I marry? Well, like, hi. I joke with Kristen every so often. If we get really busy in a really busy season, I'll be like, hi, my name's Mario. I'm your husband. It's nice to see you. It's nice to
Yes.
meet you.
Yes. And I
you know,
love that because it's just kind of like, oh, yeah, wow. Hi,
yeah,
it's you. That's
yeah.
right. We do need to nurture this marriage. And it's been a while since we've had a date, or,
Hmm.
we've just sat down and talked about us
Hmm.
versus the kids.
Yes. Or any exactly, or the chores or anything else, or the bills, and all those things happen. I get it. Those are worries to happen. But
Mhm.
at some point, the kids leave, and the relationships that survive the empty nest time are the relationships that have been cultivating their marriages all the way through, so that they're not strangers by the end of it. And that's the temptation. So I think this stat still holds up. But when we look at divorces and when divorces happen across kind of like the marital time span, there's two pockets where you see concentrations where divorces happen. One is the 5 to 7 year range, where you see a concentration of divorces, that 7 year itch, that we joke about or call. There's a reason why that exists, because it's true. Um, and the reason that that's there is because you can only be polite for so long, where you're just kind of ignoring everything and sweeping it under the rug. And then it's like, oh, okay, we actually have to talk about these differences before they blow up. And so couples who are able to navigate that and have those conversations and recommit themselves do well. And then we see another one about the 20-year range. Well, what starts happening in the 20-year range? Well, a few things start happening. One, the kids are starting to leave the house. They're becoming more independent. Um, we get older. And so our bodies are changing. Our expectations around intimacy changes. Those type of things start happening at the 20-year mark. And couples who, I reiterate, have been cultivating the relationship all the way through don't get to that point and then say, well, who are you? What, like, they know who each other are. But the couples who get to that point and haven't been doing the regular dates, the regular conversations, the regular check-ins, the regular conversation starters, things that you spoke about, they get to that point and then they're lost. And then the person that they expected to be there is somebody different, because
Mm.
we change. It's hard when you've been married for 20, 25 years to not compare your spouse to who they were when you first got married. You have to choose them on the daily, as the kids say, right? You gotta choose them now. You gotta choose them today. I see you. Who are you today? Do I love you today? Do I choose you today? And constantly doing that is the task that's before us.
Just kind of recalibrating, right? Just
Hmm.
looking at each other and going, yes, in your sickness, yes, in
Hmm.
your, depression, yes, in your
Yes.
grief about something. I'm choosing to lean in and to discover more about what's going on with you, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
not taking for granted that, not taking for granted, but just like you said at the beginning, just this whole idea of like you've arrived. Like
Mm.
we've been married 20 years. Like, oh,
Hmm.
I totally know. I know what you're
Right.
going to say. I know what you could get in those habits where you
Hmm.
kind of like fill in the blanks for your spouse or dismiss something that they're going to say because you're like, no, oh, we've been together forever. Like I know what you're thinking about this. But I think
Right.
there's a mistake in doing that because you're not really rediscovering them on the daily, right?
Yeah. 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 That's exactly right. So, funny story. I share this in my lectures, but my in-laws, when they were married, they're celebrating 50 this year. So this was probably, I'd probably say it was about 15 years ago. It was like 35, 40 years that they've been married. We were over at their house and having a barbecue, and they, Bill, my father-in-law, was grilling some burgers, and brings them inside. He sits at the table. Patty, being just sweet wife, is fixing the burger for him, putting ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise on it, and the lettuce and tomato, and just making the burger for him as he's sitting down. And as she puts the ketchup on the burger, Bill goes, "Patty, I don't like ketchup on my burgers." Patty goes, "Bill, I've been making your burgers for 35 years. Why is this the first time that you've told me you don't like ketchup on your burgers?" And he goes, Bill's the most patient man in the world. He goes, I've just always been grateful that you've made my burgers, and I've never wanted to complain or make you feel like I don't appreciate what you're doing. But yeah, for today, I don't know why, but today's the day. I'm just letting you know I don't like ketchup on my burgers, right? And so this
So
is
good.
this is playing out in front of me, and I'm dying. The whole family's laughing, right? And I'm like, "You guys, this is going into talk. I'm sorry. Your son-in-law. This is what I do for a living, so I apologize, but this is what's going to happen, right?" And it made me think that we just, again, we take these things for granted. Our taste buds change. My favorite ice cream when I was early on was mint chocolate chip. It's evolved. I'm more of a butter pecan type of guy. And if my wife was to just go get some mint chocolate chip ice cream from the grocery store as a way to treat, or show her whatever, just appreciation for me, great, that I would receive it. But if she brought butter pecan, I'd be like, oh well, she's paying attention, to where I'm at right now.
Yes.
And I know those things sound material or may sound insignificant, but they're not. They're just the little ways that we do communicate. I see you. I recognize that you're changing. I'm keeping up with you. I choose you as you are today.
Yes. Underscore the word choose, because love is a choice. I just
Hmm.
did an episode a couple back about love being a choice,
Hmm.
and how kids define love, and it, it, it's this daily act of just saying, like, how you are
Hmm.
today is enough.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I choose you as you are today, in whatever aspect that means, and whatever you're going through, and whatever is headed your way. Like, I'm going to be your partner. I'm going to be your person.
Hmm.
I think that happens too. The sense of, like, well, we've kind of developed our own, interests. We have our own career paths. We're 20 years into this thing. You're a therapist, you're a financial advisor, whatever it is, whatever the
Hmm.
dynamics are. And you lose sight. You could lose sight of being on the same team,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And so, like you said, what happens is you share the same last name, you live under the same roof, but you've sort of siloed yourself, and that division becomes greater and greater over time. But to the outside, it looks like, well, no, you're still living together, you're still married, you're still, celebrating the anniversary or whatever. But there's a lot of little things that are missing that really connect you and help you to rediscover your spouse.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
another kind of danger at the longer you get married, if you kind of head on to those, individual paths.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I love the phrase that you said just a few minutes ago of "you are enough," and really seeing your spouse as being enough. I mean, that's hard, right? I mean, that's really hard because they're not perfect and they're going to make mistakes. And husbands aren't going to fix the leaky faucet maybe as fast as the wives want them to fix it. Wives might be a little bit more nagging than husbands would want. Or I know I'm playing stereotypes here, but just giving examples. In in if we can see each other as being enough while still knowing how to communicate what our needs are in a way that is respectful, in a way that invites conversation, in a way that invites dialogue, not just demanding, then I think that's the key here. And back to this whole notion of it being a sacrament, isn't that the way that God sees us? I mean, like, God recognizes that we are enough and he chooses us and he loves us, while at the same time recognizing that we're not perfect and we do have sins and we do have faults, and that we're on a journey and that we're trying to get better, and we're trying to stop eating ice cream at midnight or stop doom scrolling on YouTube or whatever the case might be. But God recognizes that that's the journey, and He's not expecting us to be perfect right now, but He's got a plan that's going to lead us towards human perfection. And I think that's the way that we're invited to love our spouse.
Hmm. Yes. And forgiveness has to be a part of this,
That's
right?
right.
Like, because
Hmm.
we are so different,
Hmm.
we are going to hurt each other. And because we love each other so much, we can be hurt by the other
Hmm.
so easily,
Yeah.
right? This is a person that is the closest person, human person to me at this
Right.
point, you know? And so forgiveness in our differences has got to be at the forefront of our marriage. And if that's not something that we aren't practicing, it's worthwhile in going, what's going on here? Why
Mm.
am I not accepting responsibility for something that I did that was hurtful to my spouse?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? Did my parents model
Hmm.
apologies and asking for forgiveness for me? Maybe not. Okay, then how can you work together with your spouse on the virtue of forgiveness, right? On saying, man, I'm sorry. I totally railroaded you about the decision you made about selling the rental house or whatever it was.
Hmm.
I need to back up and allow you to share your perspective with me. And I'm going to tune in a different way where I'm really here to hear your side. I really want to learn something about you. So I hope you can forgive me in this scenario. I find
Hmm.
that forgiveness in my own marriage, just apologizing and asking for forgiveness, it's just like the glue, right? It's like, oh, forget it. If you say you're sorry to me, I'm like, phew, it's gone. I'm like, yes, let's hug it out and instant forgiveness. It's just not with everything, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it makes such a difference, right? Is
Yeah.
saying that I'm accepting that something has gone wrong here, something is different in our relationship, and I'm going to take ownership for that personally.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mercy. Mercy, right?
Mm.
Mercy.
Yes.
It absolutely is part of this package. And I know your audience isn't in all Catholic, but there's a phrase that comes to mind here by Pope Francis when he, on his letter during the Year of Mercy, where he talks about like the Father's love. The way that we receive it is mercy. It's God's love for us, and then God gives that love because that's what fathers do. That's the role of being a dad, is to be merciful. And it's such as the same, I think, within spouses. Again, if we're modeling this image, if we're being this image of Christ's love to his people, then we have to choose mercy. We have to choose forgiveness. And most things that we argue about are insignificant. And I would imagine that most people listening, if you think about your most recent argument, you probably can recount the feeling and the intensity of the emotion, but you probably can't remember all the details of what it was that was going on. It takes you a second to actually think about, how do we actually start that argument? And usually it's something dumb or insignificant, like someone takes too long to pick a movie while you're watching Netflix or something of that nature. Um, that ends up being these little patterns of bickering that we can fall into. But as you said, yes, if we can forgive each other, if we can accept some humility, and we can be merciful towards each other, then that's going to help a long way. Now, when it
Mm.
comes to big transgressions, of course, when we're talking about affairs or porn addictions or blowing a lot of money or things of that nature, yes, forgiveness is still part of the process, but it's going to that's a different process of what forgiving some big transgression like that would look like compared to some of the more minor bickering things that tend to happen.
Hmm. As you said that, I imagine that, if you're developing this practice of taking ownership, apologizing, asking for forgiveness, granting forgiveness in the little things, in the Netflix things, in the, um, you know, we always choose your restaurant kind of argument, I'm done. I'm
Yes,
not going
that's
to
it.
pick the
That's it.
restaurant anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Get in a practice of doing that with the small things, then when you're faced with one of these big transgressions, which you're going to be in some way, shape, or form, right? I mean, this is just sort of inevitable in married life. And as a parent, you're going to be very disappointed by
Mm-hmm.
someone in your family, or there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be something um, that you just couldn't even imagine in your wildest dreams that would happen to your kids or your spouse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine just those small daily acts of humility and apologizing and forgiving really build this foundation for when something like that happens, to be able to access that mercy a little bit easier than if that's not been a practice for you for many
Mm-hmm.
years, or that's not something that you grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like if you think of uh, these positive interactions or these moments of mercy, these little ones, as being deposits into the bank account. And then every transgression is being a withdrawal from the bank account. That definitively, the more that you have in the bank account, the more cachet you have, the more that you have to draw from should a big transgression occur. Um, and if that hasn't been the standard in the relationship, then big things like that certainly can be like a doomsday for couples.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just switch the conversation a
Sure.
little bit, because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah, we're getting
ask
we're getting a
you.
little heavy there. We're getting a little
I
heavy there.
love
So,
it. This is good. I love to go deep. I love it. But I want to ask you, you're out and about speaking in different places. You're working, you enjoy working with young adults
hmm
around how to date well and preparing themselves for marriage. So
hmm
give us some like some ideas about statistics, some observations that you've made about young adults, young single adults, and like what are they worried about when it comes to finding a mate? What are they
hmm
worried about when it comes to the idea of marriage?
hmm
What's going on for these people who are in their 20s and not dating or not married yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we see a difference between religious groups and non-religious groups. And the research supports this, that there are differences, very clear differences in perceptions of marriage, expectations for marriage, desire for marriage in one camp versus the other. And I think what's happened here, and somebody who's a secular writer, Christine Emba, phrases it this way. She says that marriage has undergone a major change in our society, in the sense that 50 years ago, when our parents were getting married, marriage was viewed as a cornerstone project. You got married young, often right out of high school, late teens, early 20s, maybe right out of college. You got married young and you kind of figured out adulthood along the way. And so it was a cornerstone project. But now marriage has been viewed more as a capstone project, in that you get your career established, you go to college, you get your career established, and then maybe at some point you start saying, I think it's time for me to get married now that I've done all these things. And in our society, when we've made that pivot culturally, basically what we're saying is that marriage is kind of optional, or marriage is second to our career. And our career is going to be the thing that's going to give us security. Our career is going to be the thing that's going to give us meaning. Our career is going to be the thing that's going to give us camaraderie. Our career is going to be the thing that's going to give us fellowship. In in marriage, it's nobody says this outright, but it almost feels like it's like it is outdated. Well, some people do say that outright, but really that it's this optional enterprise. If you choose it, great. If you don't choose it, that's fine. And again, I understand that we don't want to put pressure back in the old days where it's like, if you're not married by 35, you're an old maid, like, and your life is over.
Right.
Okay, fine. I'm happy we've walked away from that type of pressure, but we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, as we have in a lot of things. And I think it's time for us to kind of recalibrate and bring it back to the middle. A great book that I would encourage people to read is a book by Brad Wilcox called Get Married. It has all the research, all the information in that book that lets you know why marriage, even today in 2025, well, the book was published last year, but even today in 2025, is the preferred option. We see across the board, married couples are happier than their single counterparts. Married couples are better off financially than their single counterparts, even compared to couples that are cohabitating. Married couples have more frequent sexual intimacy than their single counterparts. Married couples have a deeper faith. It just across the board, marriage is a pretty darn good institution. It's a pretty darn good arrangement. And so that message needs to get out there again. We need to recommunicate that. Our religious groups, our Christians, our Catholics, those who practice some type of faith get that. They understand that. They know that that's still preached there. But the secular groups, by and large, that's not being communicated. And that's important because when it comes to this question of dating, is that we do see this divide that happens. And I work with a lot of Christian and Catholic couples and singles who are trying to navigate the dating space, and they go on the secular apps and they struggle to find somebody who's going to match their values. Your face just said it all. I mean, it's exactly, exactly. Oh my gosh, what's going on, right? And so they have a hard time finding somebody who shares their faith or shares their values. But then often they go on the Christian apps or the Catholic apps, and they may struggle finding somebody who's interesting. I hate to say it that way, but they may have shared values, but they may not have shared interests. Let me say it a little more charitably. And so there seems to be a mismatch. And so you're trying to find somebody who's hitting both of these, that we have shared values, but we also have shared interests, personality. We have some commonality that's here. So this is part of the reality that we're in. We see this even politically. We're finding more and more that when you ask Republicans versus Democrats, would you date like a Democrat? Would you date a Trump supporter? Like majority of women say absolutely not. That check off the Democrat side. It's so just this polarization in our society is creating uh, subgroups, and within those subgroups, you're having a harder time finding people and connecting with people. So I think we just, again, it's okay for us just to rethink marriage. Let's put marriage back where it needs to be as something that's aspirational, as something that's worthy. And let's communicate that message again to our young people so that they can see it as something that they should be striving for. I'll say one more thing about just kind of the trends. There was a study that was done that was asking college students their perceptions of marriage. And the vast majority of them said that they are looking for some type of long-term committed relationship. But when asked what their perception was of other people, that percentage dropped drastically. So in essence, what the research is showing is that most young adults by themselves, or college students by themselves, feel like they're ready for a long-term committed relationship, but they think that the other person, the other party, doesn't want that. And so then we end up kind of curtailing what we want, what we think other people want, when the majority of people actually do want some type of lasting love in their lives.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I call that MSU and making stuff up, right? You're like,
See
well,
what I
I
like that.
want
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
for life,
Yeah.
but I think Joe just really,
Yeah.
he's not ready. He doesn't want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
And we don't know how to talk about it, or we just kind of do the flirting and the fun stuff. And then, we don't really know what that means.
so as a parent, you're raising boys,
Raising
right?
boys, trying my
You've got
best.
one in
Mercy.
college.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, is there any
Pray for my
advice that you
wife,
would
please.
give to, what'd you say?
Pray for my wife, please.
Yes. I know all my friends who have boys only. I'm like, I want to start like a little group for women who have sons only, where
Yeah.
it's like we go to the spa, we paint our nails together, like we do all the girly things that are just like not happening over at that house or
Yeah.
whatever, and like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just really pour on the femininity. Uh, but no, I mean, is there anything as parents raising kids who are going
Mhm.
to be dating and who we really want to be married adults and good partners in marriage? Is there anything you would say like, man, I've heard parents say these types of things to their kids, and that really has a negative effect on the child wanting to date or wanting to be married or, any of those, like, just don't do this.
Yeah. 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 So I'll get to that. Let me back into it. Right. So
Okay.
first, I would say it's our responsibility to raise healthy, functioning adults. And we have to each think about what we want. So, starting with the end in mind, so to speak. Like, what is it that we want our kids to be when they leave our home? They were never ours to possess. They were always a gift given to us by God. We are stewards of this eternal soul that God has put into our family, into our responsibility. How are we shepherding this person? How are we discipling them? What are we trying to accomplish? What really are we trying to do? And so for me, like, it's a simple list, right? I would say I want my boys first and foremost to know Jesus, okay, have some type of relationship with our Lord. I want my kids to not be addicted to pornography, all right? And I want my kids to be able to talk to pretty girls, all right? Like just feeling comfortable at least having some type of conversation with the opposite sex, all right?
Yes.
Man, if I can do those three things, I'm out, right? Like I've done my job. Thank you, Jesus. Like we're good, right? Like that's what I want. I want them to be good men who know how to be respectful of other women. They don't have sisters, unfortunately, so a lot of these lessons are learned primarily through friendships and then through dating. I had sisters growing up, and I was grateful for that. My sister set me straight on many occasions, which I'm really grateful for them for that. Okay. So, what are the things that we're seeing? Well, first, we need to have just openness about dialogue related to relationships, relating to sex, relating to sexuality, setting expectations clear about chastity. All of those things should just be normal parts of our conversations within our family. We want to come back. I'm happy to do that as another episode about how to talk to your kids about sex and what's age appropriate along the way. Great conversation that we can reserve that for some other time. But if you've been navigating that and having those conversations with them along the way, then when it starts coming to dating, then it's just the next step. We're just talking about the things that we've been talking about. What I often see in more conservative circles is a lot of fear surrounding the topic of dating, especially for high schoolers. I don't think that we need our fifth graders to be dating. I don't think we need our middle schoolers to be dating. I don't think we need early high school to be dating. But I do think that there has to be some openness to dating, maybe 16, 17, last couple of years in high school. And that terrifies people. They're like, well, dating should be for marriage. Yes, absolutely. Dating is ultimately about marriage, 100%. I'm not saying throw spaghetti against the wall and just let them do whatever the heck they want. No, but let's cultivate that. Let's see, like, are they interested in somebody? And I'm not saying put pressure on your kids to date, but I'm saying let's at least have openness for that and have conversations about that. Are they interested in somebody? Why are they interested in them? Is it just because that person's attractive physically, or is there something more that's going on there? Start welcoming that. Let's start to see how we can be respectful to women. Again, I'm a father of boys who speak in this perspective. Speaking to our boys about being respectful, about why are you interested in her? Is it just because she's hot, or is it because there's something more that's there? And there's something more that's there, then let's explore that. Get into the relationship. Start giving them some skills, some tools to be able to have conversations. We want our kids to be able to have some of these experiences while they're still under our roof, because we want to be able to shepherd them, again, guide them, help them. If they have the first heartache, I mean, I'm okay with that. Let that happen under the roof. Let's grieve that together. Let's give them a model for how to be able to process that grief rather than just stuffing it or doing something unproductive, like eating a tub of ice cream. Like, let's do this together. Let's let them know that family is here and that that's our job, is to help them to be able to navigate complex emotional situations. So I know I get pushback when I speak to parents about this notion of letting high schoolers date. I'm saying 16, 17, 18. I'm not saying anything before that. Okay. So I want to be clear, late high school. But it, I think we need to give our kids some opportunities to exercise the virtues that we're trying to instill in them. If we've never given them an opportunity to exercise the virtues that we've been preaching at home, then they're never going to develop the muscle memory that they need to develop when they go off into college and be by themselves when they're making those decisions unsupervised.
So good. And if you have cultivated this relationship of trust and openness, and like there's no crazy question, and
No crazy question. That's right.
we have boundaries around what we
Mm-hmm.
mean by you dating when you're in
Yep.
high school,
Yep, we
right?
have boundaries. Absolutely. Oh yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
not a free for all. Absolutely. Yeah. We want you home at a
Yes.
certain time. Like, we're going to be checking the phone from time to time. We have, we want to know what conversations are looking like. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. There's clear
Yes.
boundaries.
And you've primed the pump because you've talked to your kids at a younger age about the importance and the value of their body and
Hmm.
preserving their physical body and sex for marriage. And so
Hmm. Yep.
that's the context you're speaking in, right? Is like
Yes.
you've tilled the soil for dating well.
Yes.
And so, this recommendation of allowing your kids to date well when they're teenagers so that you can process it makes a lot of sense to me. And frankly, I needed to hear it. We have a son who's out of the house
Yeah.
already,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I remember just being new to the whole dating scene and stuff, and just I would blurt things out based on my own experience of dating
Hmm.
from my past,
Yeah.
where my son would be like, "Mom, I wasn't even thinking about you," and I'm going, "Oh shoot."
Oh, darn it. I wasn't
Right,
either.
right.
That was a hypothetical. That wasn't because of
Totally.
me. That wasn't because I did that. I mean, I just watched that in a movie.
Right. Yes, I was just seeing if you knew about
I just
that
want to see.
thing.
I want to know if you knew what that was.
Yes, but I do. I would love to have you back on the show to talk about that, because that's a whole nother thing.
Whole nother topic. Yeah.
And everyone is going to go through that with their kids. Like, you're
Yes.
gonna, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully your children are going to be teenagers and they're going to be out of the house and they're going to be out there navigating the dating world, and it's
Yep.
very different also. And there's a lot more obvious differences in people out there in the world
Hmm.
today too. Just
Yeah.
talking about accepting differences, and you know
Yes.
things that we accept about each other in our marriage as 40 something year olds are a little bit
Yeah.
different than what these young kids are being expected to
Yeah.
accept or take on. So
And basic skills like just knowing how to have a conversation, volleying back and forth. You ask a question and I ask another one. And these are skills that we can teach our kids, just basic stuff that's going to help them. So, again, the trajectory is always getting towards marriage, but there have to be some skills that they need to develop. So, if a guy, leaves the house or leaves college and doesn't have some of those basic skills in place, then that's going to be an impediment for him when he actually finds the woman who God is calling him to marry. Like, it's going on dates that are low risk. I'm not, and it casual gets a bad rap. I'm not saying casual sex. Okay. So I want to be 100% clear that the lines are there. Absolutely. But going on dates that have just lower intensity gives a little bit more space just for exploration, time for getting conversations going, developing friendship with people, just knowing how to navigate those things are going to help them. And then also seeing different people and being able to say, oh, this is what I'm looking, this is not what I'm looking for. Just having some bank there to know what it is that we're looking for is gonna be helpful. I think it's gonna be
mhm.
helpful.
So good. And I love that you developed a course on
Hmm.
dating well,
Yeah.
so that if your kid got out of the house without some of these skills, or they're floundering, or they don't want to hear it from you,
Yeah.
mom and
They can
dad,
hear it
like
from me.
Dr. Mario, he's got it going on. He's
Yeah.
got a course. He's been through it. He's got sons. It's
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The course came out of my clinical work, where about 5 years ago, I was working with a number of single folks and still am, and just hearing their stories, hearing their heartache, hearing how challenging the dating scene has been. Again, I met my wife in college before Google was a thing. I mean, Google is probably a thing, but I'm not that old. But it was before iPhones. I will definitely say that it was well before iPhones and smartphones that I was in college, and it, everything's just changed. It's changed. And so my single clients were really educating me to the problems and the challenges that were there. And I said, I think I can contribute to this. Just looked into the problem some more, could see what's going on, and recognize that my 20 years as a marriage therapist lends itself to some knowledge here that can be of help to these young couples. So Dating Well is geared towards college students, young adults, to help them navigating the ins and outs of the modern dating scene. And it's 19 video lessons. Every lesson is hovering between 7 to 17 minutes in length. So it's not very time consuming. You have reflection questions afterwards, some exercises afterwards. It just gives you enough to think about the issues at hand, and will help single people to be able to manage their expectations, might help you understand why the last relationship you're in didn't work out. It's great for couples also that are dating, to be able to help them have some conversations that maybe they wouldn't otherwise know to have. So it's been a great resource that I've been able to offer.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
tell our audience how would they find that resource? What's the best way for them to access all the free resources, the paid resources that you offer?
Yeah, head on over to my website, drmariosacasa.com, drmariosacasa.com.
Awesome. You guys can access that in our show notes as well. We have his website linked and also the book Get Married linked,
Mm-hmm.
like all the resources.
Mm-hmm.
We really, really appreciate you being with us, just blessing our community with your advice on how to accept differences in marriage and just reminding us of the beauty of the sacrament of marriage. This is the long game.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth, leaning in and dating your spouse
Yes.
throughout marriage
Yes.
and rediscovering each other. And it's like, it's the way to do it.
It's the way to do it. It's the way to do it. You got it, Jordan.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you again. And if someone wanted you to speak for at their church or school or for a group of, young adults, what would be the best way for them to contact you? Can they email you or do you have a
Mm-hmm.
contact form on your website?
Yep. Yep. All of the above. So certainly they can email me at hope@drmariosacasa.com. And that email is also on the website. You can also find me on any of the socials, and the handle is at Dr. Mario Sacasa. That's it across the board. So whether it's YouTube or Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever you want, whatever your flavor is, at Dr. Mario Sacasa across the board. So send me an email at hope@drmariosacasa.com or visit the website, and certainly you'll find the email there.
Awesome. Thank you. And I recommend you check out his podcast as well. Always Hope. Never enough like good podcasts. Like there's just such a variety. So thanks for getting on the airwaves. Thanks for doing everything you're doing to really bless marriages and family life. And I know it's a sacrifice and it's a calling. And you're doing a really, really great job of inspiring hope in others. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Jordan. I really appreciate the conversation. It was great.
Awesome. Guys, I'm going to tune in to another episode with you like real soon. And if you're binging these episodes, just go on to the next one. But don't forget to share this one with your spouse. We talked about how you can hear information or be enlightened about something. And if your spouse isn't hearing that or you're not sharing it with them, it may fall flat. So be sure to share these episodes with your spouse. It's a good idea to pour a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and sit back and pull up YouTube and watch this together and have a meaningful discussion about it. That counts as a date too. So anyway, we'll continue to bring you wonderful experts on our show. And in the meantime, do what it takes to put just 1% effort into your marriage today, and you will be glad years down the road. Thanks for joining us.